So in this video, we're going to be discussing how do we label the attributes of an exponential function on its graph. So first of all, let's go ahead and talk about the three main attributes that we're going to talk about. So y-intercept. Sometimes our graph can have an x-intercept, and we'll talk about that as well when we do have one. Asymptote. So asymptote is basically the line that it never touches. It kind of goes towards it and gets really, really close, but it never touches it or goes beyond it. And then the growth and the decay factor, which we talked about, it's like how much it's growing by. Okay, so before we get to the domain and the range, let's first talk about the more obvious attributes. So first we have the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is the same as for any function. It's the value of y when x is 0. So it's basically when the graph touches the y-axis. So this is my y-intercept. And in this case, my y-intercept is the point 0, 1. Okay, again, it's a point. And of course, if this graph were to touch the x-axis, we would ask what's the x-axis, but it doesn't because this graph has an asymptote, which basically means it's a line that kind of is a boundary line right here. If you notice, it gets really, really close, and if you were to like look at this graph even more, it will get really, really close, but it would not go beyond that. So our asymptote is, in this case, it's the x-axis or the line y equals 0. Okay, so it's a y equals line because again, it's going to be a horizontal line. So now the next thing that we need to talk about is the growth and the decay factor. Well, the growth and the decay factor is just like what we were finding before. It's, well, what are we multiplying to get from one point to the next? So this is our first point right here. And this is another point right here. So we're going to take two good points and kind of like find what is the factor between them by dividing. So we're going to take our last point, which has a y value of 4. And we're going to divide it by our first point here, which has a y value of 2. And if we divide it, we can know what we're multiplying by. And so 4 divided by 2 is 2. So our growth factor is 2. Okay, so great. And if you kind of see from here to here, right, I started 1, and 1 times 2 is 2. Then 2 times 2 is 4. So obviously our growth factor is good. So we're going to write here growth factor. It's not a decay factor because this is not going down. And then here my domain are my x's. Technically this graph keeps going on forever. I should put these arrows so you can basically plug in any x. So my domain is all real numbers. And then my range, let's kind of look at this. It does not go beyond 0, but it can go on up forever. So keep going up forever. There's no limit how it goes up. So in this case, my range is going to be f of x is greater than 0. I'm not going to put the equal sign here because I cannot touch the asymptote. So it's just greater than 0. Okay, now here's my next exponential function here. So we're going to do the same thing. Okay, so first of all, this point right here is my y-intercept. And so it's a point. So the point here is 0, 4. And then this line right here that I labeled right here is my asymptote. And this asymptote in this case is the line y equals 3. Now we're going to find the growth factor, obviously, by taking these 2 points. So here I had 4, and then here I had 5. So I'm going to take my last point, which is 5, and divide it by 4, and you get 5 divided by 4. So we can just leave it as 5 over 4. And that would be my growth factor. So growth factor Again, this is a growth factor because, again, our exponential function is going up. Now, my domain, just like before, is all real numbers because it can keep going to the right and to the left. This is all real numbers. And my range here is going to be that f of x is, well, let's see what's happening to it. So it starts here and then keeps going up forever. So it's f of x is greater than 3, and we're not going to put the equal sign because you can't equal the asymptote, so you never touch it. So it's just f of x is greater than 3. Now let's do this next one. This next one is going down. So my domain again is all real numbers because you can keep going left and right. I should have arrows on this graph really. My range, well, it starts right here, keeps going up. So your range is f of x is greater than 3. We're not going to put the equal sign because you cannot equal the equal sign. The y-intercept is right here. So my y-intercept is the point 0, 4. My asymptote here is this line right here because it never touches it. Honestly, if you can like zoomed in more, it wouldn't touch that. So it's going to be the line y equals 3. In this case, we have a decay factor because we're going down. So we're going to take 2 good points. So one good point would be my y-intercept, and another good point could be right here at -1. So we're going to take our last point of 4 and divide it by 5. So it's going to be 4 over 5, which is about 0.8. Sorry, I wrote that in the wrong spot. So our growth factor, our decay factor, sorry, is 4/5. And again, 4/5 is smaller than 1, so obviously, yes, it's decaying. So my x-intercept in this case, it doesn't have an x-intercept because it doesn't go below y equals 3, so it's not going to be at y equals 0, so there is none. Okay, so that is the end of this video, and I hope that you found this video helpful with labeling the attributes of an exponential function and kind of seeing what that graph looks like.